Welcome to Open Mic from Modalis Infrastructure Partners, where aviation talks and the world listens. From global airport and aviation developments to disruptive technology, airport investment, and much more, we unpack the trends, technologies, challenges, and opportunities shaping the global aviation industry. Now here's your host, Curtis Grad.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Modalis Open Mic podcast. My guest today is Karen Ellis from the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. And I have to say, it's been kind of a back to the future experience for you, hasn't it?
Well, thank you, Curtis, for having me on. It has been a full circle moment for me. I am currently the Assistant General Manager for Customer Experience here at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, where I started my aviation career back in 1997.
That's fantastic. You know, I was going to say it definitely feels like a homecoming of sorts for sure, right?
Yes, it does. And I'm happy to be back where I started my career. The ride was fun along the way, but there's no place like home. So I was ready to come back.
Absolutely. Well, you know, let's start the conversation and the journey at San Antonio. That's where we met a few years back, and we became acquainted through none other than Sev Fevzi, somebody we both know and love, and we were able to do a little bit of work for you there that was quite interesting. But you had a number of challenges and triumphs there. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
San Antonio being a medium hub airport, I got a chance to wear a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. Not only was I over customer experience, but I had marketing, I had public relations, I had the volunteer program, I had community development, and I think anything Jesus thought that I could handle, he threw my way, which I never said no. And that may be the problem. I never say no. I try to figure out a way of making it all fit. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, all of that centers around the customer experience.
Absolutely.
So that's why I didn't hesitate when he kept saying, oh, now you're going to do this, then you're going to oversee this.
And Jesus is a smart guy, and we all know that the most capable people are the ones you keep on throwing stuff at. And obviously, these medium and smaller sized airports, which is where I kind of grew up in the industry as well, it really helps you get a handle on a broader range of things. If you're in a big airport, you end up in a very narrow wedge of the business. But the smaller the airport, the more interesting the job, for sure.
Definitely, I would agree with that.
And what were some of the biggest challenges and accomplishments during your time there? I know that it's a bit of a unique airport in terms of its geographic location, but you had some interesting and great outcomes there from what you were working with, right?
Well, you know me, I'm always going to start with a positive. One thing I will say is it was a family organization of sorts where everybody worked together for the betterment of the organization. There was no pointing fingers at someone else and saying it's your problem. It became our problem. Yeah. And as a result of that, for a number of years, I was in San Antonio for 8 years. And I think a number of those years pre-pandemic, we were one of the top airports for our size regarding ACI ASQ Customer Experience Awards. We received those awards every year and everybody got excited about it. And then the greatest accomplishment was when we were inducted into the ACI Director General's Hall of Fame, which is an accomplishment itself. At the time, I think we were the second airport in North America to be able to receive that award. So I'm always going to start with a positive.
Absolutely, that's fantastic.
Some of the challenges with Austin being so close, people had an opportunity to decide whether they wanted to go to San Antonio or whether they wanted to go to Austin. Now, we had to continue to promote that while you may get a cheaper flight out of Austin, think of the stress, the headache, the traffic that you're going to have to deal with to get that cheaper price. So exactly. What is your time worth more than your money? So we promoted that a lot because our airport, you could get in and out without any challenges. But in Austin, that 35 traffic
Yep.
gets you every time, no matter what time of day you're traveling. And so that was one of the biggest challenges that we had. And with us being at the time similar, almost similar in size,
Hmm.
Austin obviously outgrew us, but
Yeah.
similar in size, everybody felt as though San Antonio was the small town airport. Some of us didn't mind that
Yeah.
title,
Yeah.
but others thought, we're doing this and we should be. And so that was another challenge.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the fact that San Antonio is Military City, USA. So we
Hmm.
had a lot of military employees, staffing, visitors to the airport. So we
Hmm.
had to cater our needs
Oh, yeah,
to those
absolutely.
individuals because we wanted to make sure that we could satisfy them. And I tell people all the time, you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. Just
Exactly.
because it works at one airport does not make it work at another airport. And so we were intentional about knowing who our customers were
Hmm.
and providing the services that we knew that they wanted, not necessarily that someone else was providing for them.
Yeah.
So those are a
And
couple of the challenges
yeah.
and
Yeah.
successes that we had.
You know, I always feel that, as you said, you know one airport when you know one airport, but also every airport has a different hand that they're dealt, and they have to figure out how to market it and develop it and operate it. And I had a sort of similar experience in my early career where I was the airport general manager in this small airport about an hour's drive out of Vancouver. And so Vancouver's the big gorilla
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
coast with longer haul flights and the efficiency and all that. But Abbotsford being a little bit further in the valley and linked by highway that was often congested. If you were going to Calgary, it made sense to fly out of Abbotsford. If you were going to Hong Kong, of course, you're going to go out of Vancouver.
Sure.
But we figured out very quickly that 1 million people could get to us faster than they could get to Vancouver. And if they were going on a short haul flight, that was going to be our niche. And it's not just where you're going to draw from and what your catchment area is, but what are those passengers looking for? And those passengers that were looking to go to Calgary or Edmonton or Toronto, they didn't want all the bells and whistles and the duty free. They just wanted to get where they were going. So we had a
Sure.
very cheap and cheerful terminal, but it catered to the needs of that client group. And that's all about, CX is all about knowing your client and knowing their personas. And there weren't going to be big briefcases going on a long haul and coming back with a bundle full of duty free. That's for sure.
Hmm.
Now, on that theme, I guess looking back a little bit further in your career, you were at Houston Airport Systems for a number of years as well as customer relations director, but you had this really interesting mix, I guess, between contrasting a large hub airport with some of these smaller airports and having that in your portfolio. That must have been quite interesting as well.
It really was. So I went from Hartsfield-Jackson, world's busiest airport, to the Houston airport system, which, as you mentioned, had
Hmm.
George Bush Intercontinental, which was a large hub, and then Houston Hobby, which was a
Hmm.
medium hub airport. So it was kind of a great mix. And a lot of people ask, well, which airport did you work with? And I said, I worked for both. I
Hmm.
worked 4 days at Bush and 1 day at Hobby. I had an
Yeah,
office at both locations
yeah, yeah,
because it was important for us to ensure that everybody under the umbrella was speaking the same language with regard to customer experience. And we couldn't just do one and not do the other. So it
hmm,
was an interesting mix. I actually enjoyed working more so at Hobby because it was a smaller
hmm,
airport, but everybody was, again, I got that family feel that I really embraced when I got to San Antonio,
yeah,
but it was different. It
hmm,
was in Atlanta, it's the beast,
hmm,
it's everybody. It's
yeah,
this year or last year alone, we had 106 million passengers to travel through the airport. And when you,
yeah,
just to your point, when you think about all that
yeah,
number, it's like,
hmm,
oh my God, how do you do that?
yeah,
And then going to Bush, the numbers were pretty high,
yeah,
but then going to Hobby, it wasn't. So I can work in any environment. I can
yeah,
work at the big, I can work the small. You just give me an audience and I can do my thing.
Absolutely. But having that role and having two drastically different airports at the same time, it really helps you identify and clarify what a customer personality really is. And being able to recognize that in those two different airports must have been a very interesting test case, for lack of a better word. So, we talked a little bit earlier when in the introductory remarks about your homecoming to Atlanta, and I guess that's been what, just over a year and a half,
Yes.
almost 2 years. So, I can imagine it must have been thrilling, but at the same time a little bit daunting. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're settling in and what you've got your sights set on for 2026 and beyond. You're really just getting traction now, I would suspect, but what's in store?
I wouldn't say that it was daunting. I think I was more excited to be able
Hmm.
to come back to where I
Hmm.
started
Hmm.
my career. I was energized to be able to start it all over again. And coming back and seeing some of the same stakeholders that were here before that kind of knew what we did before. And then now that I'm back, they're like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, we know what we're in store for. We know what you've done in the past. And so
Hmm.
we're now looking for you to bring those same things back now that you're here. What's in store? I'm working on increasing training, customer
Hmm.
experience training. We rebranded the customer service department. It was guest relations, but now it's customer experience. And back when I was here before, guest experience was okay. It was a good
Yeah,
name,
yeah,
but
yeah.
everything has evolved. So it went from guest experience to customer service to now the entire experience.
Hmm.
And I think when you talk about it in those terms, you see it differently. It's not just in a box, it's not
Yeah,
just a department, it is the entire experience that we're now focused on. And so I wanted to make sure with the training that we had enough staff to be able to do
yeah.
it because when I came back, we didn't have what I
Hmm.
thought was adequate staffing to be able to train the number of
For
employees
sure.
that are here. But when I was here before, we had 17 trainers and we
Hmm.
trained 6 days a week. We
Hmm.
trained 10,500 employees in 2.5 years.
Yeah,
So we were
that's a lot.
getting the word out that there's something different happening and we're preparing people to deal with the customers that will be coming in. So
Hmm.
that was my number one focus when I came back, to get enough trainers to be able to offer training
Yeah.
to the airport wide community, whether it's an airline employee, a concessions employee,
Hmm.
a wheelchair employee. All of these individuals
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
will be getting a similar kind of message of what customer experience is. And that helps us because when passengers come into the airport and let's say they don't have such a great experience,
Yeah.
they immediately wonder why they're treated one way at one place and one way at another place. And their
Hmm.
thing is, well, they all work for the airport. Well, we know that that's not the
Well,
case,
it's
but what
exactly the
we
challenge, right?
but we want to make sure that there is at least a similar understanding about what's important from a customer experience perspective. And this new training, we're offering conflict resolution,
Hmm.
de-escalation, we're talking about ADA, we're talking about human trafficking, which are
Okay.
things that
Hmm.
we didn't focus on before, but now we want to make sure once since we have this captive audience
Yeah,
to give them this information. And it's
absolutely.
amazing how I can sit in a class and I can watch the light bulb go off and people are like, oh, I I never really thought about it
Yeah,
like that. But now that it's
exactly.
being introduced to them, they're thinking differently.
And I suspect that the difference now too is there's a stronger focus on technology, but at the end of the day, we're in a people business. But the technology is a tool, but it can't replace the human contact. But getting that balance right is going to be always has been a challenge, but will be even more important going forward.
So let me give you an example of something that happened to me in San Antonio regarding technology. So pre-pandemic, our
Hmm.
military passengers wanted us to talk to them just all the way from parking to the gate. They
Mhm.
just wanted that interaction.
Yeah.
But post-pandemic, with technology,
Yeah.
they started telling us, yeah, we don't want you to be too close. We want to be able to do it ourselves,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
we want you to be close in case there's a problem. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
new technology of introducing the bag tags where they could do them themselves, they
Hmm.
wanted to have that flexibility with the technology to be able to do it, but have somebody looking over their shoulder just in case they had a problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, knowing our customers allowed
Hmm.
us an opportunity to make that change with technology to
Hmm.
to give them something where they would be satisfied with us being too close but not too close.
Well, and at the end of the day, the adoption rate in technology has a lot to do with age. And the older you get, the less inclined you are to jump on board with the technology. And being able to serve customers from 8 years old to 80 years old is pretty important stuff. So,
Yeah, I'm a perfect
absolutely.
example of that for
Mhm.
technology. I'm coming. I'm kicking and screaming, but I'm coming. And so I rely on my youngest daughter. It's like, well, tell me how to do this again. And she's like,
Yeah,
okay, mommy, let me show you again.
yeah.
But I'm coming.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're all going through it, but I think the good news is that we're at the sort of the crest, the beginning crest of that wave. That even when we get to those golden years, we've been somewhat indoctrinated already. That I really feel for older people traveling now that never grew up with the technology. But it's just like anything. It takes time to adapt and adopt. So. There's a bit of a tradition in our Airport IR where we ask people to share their crazy stories, and we all have crazy stories from all these years in aviation, but you must have a few that come to mind.
The craziest story that I could think of is when I was in San Antonio and we had a monkey that was being retired. He's being flown into San Antonio to be retired in San
Okay,
Antonio.
this sounds
I
good.
can't remember his story, but it was a big deal for him to come to San Antonio to retire.
Hmm.
Well, he flew in, and some kind of way, his crate got open.
Oh no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he had his field on the airfield. He was running everywhere. He got into the baggage claim
Oh man.
system. And every time somebody, it was like cat and mouse. Every time someone got close to him, he'd run off.
Oh
He'd
Lord.
run off. And we were like, and this I promise you, this made international news because everybody was
I'm sure it would.
videoing
Yeah.
the monkey running and people trying to catch him. And then became everybody's going to the window that was in the gate hole area to see what was happening. So it was a thing. It was really a thing. We had to get wildlife to
Uh,
come out, and they had to, unfortunately, tranquilize him to be able to
okay.
get him
Okay.
back in the crate.
Okay. Okay.
Well, they got him back in the crate and took him to the sanctuary where he was going to be retiring. And so now it's a thing. So we went and we had a news story there where we were taking him bananas and things of that nature. But
Okay. Okay.
it was quite hairy. I want to say for more than an hour.
Oh
That
God.
and so of course, we had to notify FAA. It's like,
Um,
hey, this is what's happening. We're gonna have to delay flights or be very careful as flights are trying to go out because we didn't know where he was gonna run. And of
mhm.
course, we didn't want. Can you imagine if we had a plane? We would have never been able to live that down.
Oh
So
man.
it thankfully it all worked out where he was able
Yeah.
to get back into the crate and get to his place of retirement. So
Yeah.
that was the
Uh,
one of the craziest stories that I can think of in my
yeah.
career.
And I can well imagine that some people thought that maybe that tranquilizer would be handy for unruly passengers as well, but perhaps not so easy to implement. But yeah, for
I,
sure.
I I will never agree with you on
Yeah,
publicly on that.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's funny because that craziest story, the animals on airside seems to be a recurring theme. One of our other guests, Athanasios, he had a horse loose
Oh,
on the airport that came out of a crate as well. So a little bit hard to hide a full-sized horse running around the airfield. But yeah, we all have crazy stories, and that's a good one. I enjoy that. Getting back to customer experience, and I think it's safe to say that you and I are both true believers in the merits of CX, but not everybody in our airport realm is a true believer. So I I think this is an opportunity for us to help convince them. We all know that a happy passenger is a spending passenger, but not everybody's so bullish on the CX approach of cause and effect relationships. So what would you say to those naysayers, and how do we convince them of what we know to be true?
I will say that I have seen a surge in leadership drinking the customer experience water. They're
Exactly.
now starting to get it. And I think the biggest thing is competition.
Mm-hmm.
When you can tell them the cause and effect of good service and revenue, because if you talk numbers,
Mm-hmm.
you will have an ear. They're
Yep.
listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you go in and you continue to talk just soft service, oh, it's just a nice thing to do. Oh, we
Mm-hmm.
think it's great. We think that'll make them happy.
Yeah.
It's going to fall on deaf ears. But you
Mm-hmm.
start talking how much money
Mm-hmm.
a satisfied passenger or a happy passenger will bring to your organization,
Mm-hmm.
the ears perk up. You you
Exactly.
you get them thinking differently. And so in my tenure, I've learned that go with that approach versus, oh, it's just a nice
Mm-hmm.
thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you could provide some statistics on the opposite side of that,
Mm-hmm.
bad customer service. I was just watching a video that we created back in 2010 when we started the customer service training here at Hartsfield-Jackson. And we did this video, and we had different scenarios where we could see a customer that was going in that was looking for something specific, and the employee kind of brushed him off and the customer just left. And so we
Mm-hmm.
had the statistics of how many people will come into your location, but how many will leave without purchasing anything, even if it was something that they wanted because
Mm-hmm.
of bad service.
Yeah.
And again, I'm telling you, that is what the eye opener
Yeah.
is when they like, oh yeah, you're right. We're
Yeah.
seeing money walk out the door just because of
Mm-hmm.
service or bad service.
Well, and we've all done that. You walk into a store or a restaurant and you're not acknowledged and you're not greeted, chances are you're going to walk out the door. And there's two different disciplines within airports. There's the retail side or the revenue
Mhm,
side of things, and then there's their operations side. And through our business, the interesting thing is we've got two different sort of disciplines in the company, but
mhm,
sometimes CX comes to us through our operational advisory. Sometimes it comes through our commercial advisory. But very rarely, and this is one of the examples where they're really thinking ahead, but we're working with Ferrovial at JFK Terminal 1, the new Terminal 1 project,
mhm.
and they've had us involved on the operational advisory on ConOps, concept of operations, since day one. But it also includes CX. So Sev and Peter G, they're helping us with that aspect of it as well. And they're thinking about customer experience and operational efficiency during the design phase, not during the construction phase or not during the opening phase. And in my experience in the past, the designer never talks to anybody in operations, and they certainly don't talk to anybody that's worried about retail or commercial performance. And it all ties back to customer experience. If you have
That's
to
right.
walk like 3 miles to get to your gate and you're not sure how to get there and you might be late, you're going to walk right past the retail.
Every
Um,
time.
and there's an operational aspect to it that if you can keep people focused and have proper wayfinding and make it intuitive, people just relax and they spend more money when they're happy and content, and they'll be pushing that negative frowny face when they have to
Mhm.
walk too far. So that kind of takes me on to the next related question. In Atlanta, you continue to build on the work that you've done in San Antonio and Houston, but defining those passenger personas and the mapping of the journey. We talked about that or touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you share the insights and approach to getting this right? Because, we just talked about the operational commercial aspects of it, but if you don't get the formula right, it can sometimes be counterproductive. But how do you get an effective CX program balancing those elements?
So the first thing that I would say is I want to go back to something that you said before. Tying all those elements from commercial to construction to revenue and CX are critical. All four of those pieces have to be in place in the puzzle for you to have an effective organization. That's just
Absolutely.
my story, and I'll stick to it and say that every time because you're right. When designers and engineers are during the construction of whatever that is, that's their only focus. They're not
Mhm.
seeing, hearing, knowing. They look at what the contract call requires
Mhm.
them to do, to have, to build, not looking at anything other than that. And so sometimes it can be a challenge. And so having CX on the front line before
Mhm.
construction even starts provides a different perspective
Mhm.
for them
Mhm.
to consider as they're going through the process. For us, again, it's important to know who your customers are, and you can't build your journey if you don't know that. And then what we focus on is knowing each touch point and what happens within
Mhm.
that touch point.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
happens to the experience for whether it's negative or positive? But let's look at those areas that we have identified are 8 or 9 touch points that we can
Mhm.
specifically drill down on from a customer perspective and also from an employee perspective, because it's critical that you have both both opinions or both information from both groups, because they're utilizing the facility maybe in different ways,
Mhm.
but both of those groups coming together in each one of the touch points can give you a vital picture of what's happening, so that you know where your service gaps are, you know where you need to make improvements, and then knowing who your customers are and what they want in those particular areas
Mhm.
helps you to design what your airport is going to look like to be able to satisfy that customer and ultimately move the needle for you to increase and enhance the satisfaction that they'll receive when they're traveling through the airport.
Yeah, for sure. And that design element, we're working on a master plan right now for a greenfield airport in Africa, and uh, we're speaking directly with the contractor. And really interesting when you say, you need to understand the client and the culture, but they were like, they said we need to minimize the number of escalators and moving walkways, and that goes contrary to moving people. And when you've got a large terminal, you need moving walkways to move people so they don't have to be walking 2 or 3 kilometers. But they made 2 points. One was an operational point, and the other one was a customer experience point. The
Mm-hmm.
the the issue around the mechanical equipment was in that particular country, they have a very difficult time maintaining
Mm-hmm.
escalators, and
Mm-hmm.
the escalators are always broken down in the existing terminal. So part of the design is you can't eliminate it, but you can kind of manage around it with strategically placed ramps and things like that. But the cultural part was really interesting. They said women in this country wear long skirts, and they're very fearful of those skirts getting caught in the
Yes.
mechanical equipment. Whether it's a
Yes.
real or perceived concern, it's something you need to address, and you can't address that at the operational phase. It has to be at the design phase.
I'm not going to say the airport, but an airport was constructing a new terminal,
Hmm.
and that new terminal customer experience was not part of the design phase. I'm not going to even
Hmm.
say the construction phase. I'm going to say the design phase. So they built this new terminal, And then they started getting complaints about there being, to your point, a long distance that they had to walk to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they went back to that customer experience manager and said, "Hey, why are we getting these complaints? What can you do at this point that it's already constructed to fix this?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know I'm going to use this quote, and I know that I probably shouldn't use it in an aviation environment.
Yeah.
But one of my former employees, who was a former military guy, said, "If you're going to invite me to the crash, invite me to the takeoff."
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I
Exactly.
started using that because that is so true. You
Mhm.
want me to clean it up, but I was not part of the invitation to get it started, to get it
Yeah.
developed, to get it designed.
Yeah.
And there's
Exactly.
no way to be able to clean it up after the fact.
Yeah. And I hear you there, because I spent most of my expat career arriving at crash sites, quote unquote, where designs were already fixed, contracts were already set, and I would arrive and try to make the best out of design without any sort of operational or commercial input, and then you try to piece it all back together or re-engineer it, because you can't re-engineer the building. You have to re-engineer the processes and the people. And it comes back again, as we talked about earlier, it's all about people, and it's all about technology and how you get them to work together. So
Can't put
the
that
one
genie back in the bottle once it's out.
yeah. And actually, one of the things that struck me, and this has been years ago now since I've been through Atlanta, but you've got those 5 or 6 terminals. They're all lettered. It's very well laid out, but effectively, you've got a very consistent or homogeneous infrastructure, but you had very different airlines and customers working out of each one of those terminals. For you, this must almost be like operating 5 or 6 different airports with those five or six fingers, right?
For sure.
Now, the one thing I did remember, and being aviation people, we all speak in the phonetic alphabet, and I was like, oh, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and I'm like, David?
Delta.
What on, yeah, Delta, right? But are they still calling it David because of Delta, or did they finally acquiesce to renaming it Delta?
I think they acquiesced to Delta.
Yeah,
As far as I know, it's always been
yeah,
Delta.
yeah, yeah. But years ago, I
Well,
remember
of course, here it's going to be that.
Yeah. Years ago, I think they did it just not to confuse people, because Delta wasn't operating from the terminal. But
Got
but
it.
for us aviation purists, when you hear somebody mispronouncing the phonetic alphabet, it's a bit jarring. But for good reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of getting towards the end of our chat here. But one of the things that I really found interesting, and it's award season in Hollywood. It's got the Golden Globes, the Oscars, the Tonys, all that kind of stuff. But having collected some pretty impressive hardware yourself for the last few years, ACI, I'm just going through the list here. ACI Ted Bushelman Award in 2020, the AMAC Awards in 2023, and I think more recently in 2024, AMAC Charles C.J. Johnson Award, and induction into the Smart Airports Hall of Fame. That's some pretty impressive hardware. But reflecting on all these accolades, and we talked a little earlier about achievements, but what's been sort of the one thing that's really stuck out in your mind as your greatest achievement, and I would say so far as a qualifier?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am still honored for the recognition for all of the awards that you mentioned.
Mhm.
If I had to select one as my favorite, or the one
Mhm.
that I cherish the most, it would be the Charles C.J. Johnson Award.
Mhm.
CJ, and that was his nickname. That's what we
Yeah.
called him. He was a vendor, or worked with one of the vendors here at Hartsfield-Jackson when I was here back in my first round here.
Okay.
He was the kindest, uh, most caring person that you could meet. He would
Mhm.
always have a smile on his face. He would always offer words of encouragement, no matter what the situation. You could always find him speaking, talking, helping
Mhm.
anybody that he would come across. whether it was somebody that he knew or somebody that he didn't know. Honestly, I just cried like a baby when I got it because I knew him. And for somebody to see that in me, it just melted my heart to know
Yeah, well,
that
it's
somebody sees
personal.
it other than me. I mean,
Yeah, it's
he was
personal.
just that. Yes, exactly. It was personal.
Having people in your airport environment that can humanize it, because it can be pretty detaching when you're traveling through. You just feel like a number, or you're being herded through the airport like cattle. But every once in a while, somebody helps humanize it and steps aside and helps people that are a little bit lost or overwhelmed. I remember there was one fellow one day, I think it was going through Dubai, but you could tell he was really agitated. He was worried he was going to miss his flight, and he was
Mm-hmm.
asking me, "What's the gate number?" And I looked at and I explained to him where the bridge
Mm-hmm.
is. I said, "I'm going the same direction. Follow me." And so then he just became relaxed, but because he
Sure.
became a bit disoriented, it becomes overwhelming. And the bigger the airport gets, the more impersonal it gets, and the more
Sure.
imposing it gets as well. So we talked a lot about serious stuff and all the things that we're passionate about, but we always like to finish off our interviews with something a little fun and frivolous. And we've got something we call the Magic Mirror Quiz. It's 15 questions, rapid fire, first thing that comes to mind. And it's meant to be a window on your soul without being too imposing. So
Okay.
let's have some fun with it. So
Okay. Here we
starting
go.
with favorite aircraft, civilian or military, current or historical. What's your favorite?
Civilian 777.
It's a nice airplane, and when you get in it, you know that you're going to have a smooth ride, right?
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, apples or oranges?
Oranges. I'm a citrus girl.
Okay, and where you living, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, hate tea.
Okay, flat or sparkling?
Flat.
Yeah.
Simple.
Okay. Okay. Preference, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay. We've had a few surprises on this one, but yeah, dog seems to be the favorite one. On the animal theme, scariest animal.
A tiger.
Okay. Yeah, that's a valid one for sure. Favorite classic car.
Camaro.
You got me there. That was one of my first cars as well.
That was
So,
my first car.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. What year?
1997.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 1979. What am I thinking?
yeah, 1979.
1979.
Okay. I was 1975. Yeah,
Okay.
that was my second car. So, and I got to be a really good mechanic because it was always breaking down, right? Here's an interesting one for you. Famous person, living or dead, you'd like to have dinner with.
President Obama.
That would be a very interesting dinner, and I would drag it out as long as possible,
As long
right?
as possible.
And there would be some crazy stories there as
Oh, I'm
well.
sure. I'm sure.
Okay, turning a little bit to something we all think about. What's the greatest fear?
Ooh, not being able to see my grandbabies.
That would be a big one. So, but I think you're close by now that you're back in Atlanta.
Actually, they're in San Antonio.
Oh no. Well, they're not too far away. At least it's the same country, right?
Well, my son-in-law, and I call him my son, and he's in the Navy. So he's
Yeah,
stationed there and he's
yeah.
getting ready to be deployed. So they're actually going to come live with me while he's on deployment. So I'm
Okay,
excited
okay.
about that.
So that's the silver lining. Fantastic.
Yes.
So, favorite dessert?
Creme brulee.
That I would agree. That's a good one as well. Earliest memory?
My dad and mom taking me shopping. I guess I can remember that.
Okay. And how old do you think you were?
Probably 5,
Yeah, yeah.
4 or 5, because we would go and get Easter outfits, and so
Oh
yeah, I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
one
That
of
that was
the
that was a big deal, right?
yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
The Easter bonnet and the whole nine
yeah.
yards.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I had the
exactly.
Easter bunny,
Great.
but yes,
Okay. Now back to the modern age. Most used app on your phone, excluding WhatsApp or Outlook.
Probably my Google Photos, because I'm
Yeah.
always looking at my grandkids.
Yeah, and we all have about 30,000 photos on our memory card. So absolutely. Favorite movie of all time?
The Lion King.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I like that too. Okay, this is the tricky one. You get one song to listen to for the rest of your life. What is it?
Whitney Houston's I Love the Lord.
Okay, that's a great one. Now I'm gonna hit you with the impossible question. I've got a number I'm thinking of from 1 to 100. What is it?
6.
So close, but not quite.
What was it?
It was 10
Oh, okay.
because you're always shooting for a 10 out of 10.
Ah,
A couple more here. What's your favorite place you visited, and what's your top bucket list destination?
favorite place I visited was Singapore,
I love
and
Singapore.
bucket list is Antarctica.
Oh wow. Okay, well, you're adventurous. So
Well,
so
I'm
you
just
don't
trying
mind.
to get to all 7 continents, and
Yeah,
that's a bucket list
yeah,
item.
yeah. That one's a trip, but I'm sure they've got some five-star accommodation somewhere on the continent. But that's a good one as well. Finally, and it's a good way to wrap things up. What's your personal mantra in less than 10 words?
Be a blessing to others.
Words to live by. I think I'll keep that one for myself too.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Well, Karen, it's been a delight, and I really was looking forward to this chat, and it's turned out to be everything I hoped it to be, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere on the conference trail, not too far from now. And in the meantime, I'm sure we'll be seeing you online and elsewhere, and taking Atlanta by storm.
Thanks for joining us on Open Mic. If today's conversation sparked ideas or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Visit airportir.com/open mic to listen to more episodes, connect with our team, and stay informed about the global aviation developments that matter to you.